Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Pewaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm education reporter Katherine Kokel, filling in this week for Mayan Silver. Today we're speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, for a special back-to-school edition of the podcast. J.R., ready to talk about school stuff?
Always.
Awesome. So students here in Milwaukee go back to school next week already. Wild. I thought it'd be a great time to chat with you about how education is shaping Wisconsin politics. Let's start, of course, with the governor's race. This fall, Governor and former State Superintendent Tony Evers will be leaving office, and either Republican Tom Tiffany or Democrat David Crowley will be taking his place. I think it's fair to say that education was a huge priority for Evers because of his previous job. What role would you say education has played during Evers' time in office?
The governor has spent a large chunk of his time in office trying to direct more resources to education, all the while fighting Republicans about various aspects of education. A good example of that has been the Act 20, which dedicated more resources to reading. Remember, this was a kind of a bill that passed. The governor used a partial veto to alternate some of the language in there. It took a year-long fight to get everything released. So they got something done. It just took longer to actually get implemented than you thought it would. But for the most part, Evers has played defense on things with education when it comes to Republicans trying to fight for more funding while trying to knock back everything from transgender athletes in schools to various, priorities for Republicans on a Parents' Bill of Rights. I mean, just on the line, these UP priorities for education, the governor is trying to be a backstop against those.
Yeah, I want to go back to that famous or perhaps infamous 400-year veto. For our listeners, that's where Evers used the line item veto to secure increases in the limits that school districts could raise their revenue limits until the year 24-25. There's been a lot of backlash from Republicans on that, like you just mentioned. Could the next governor walk back that line item veto if he wanted to?
No, that law can be changed at any time. So to give context to people about this, in Wisconsin, there's a formula where you take the main pot of state aid and property taxes, and that's what you can spend per student. That annual increase is where the governor reworked the language. Rather it being for 2 years, he made it for 400 years. Now, the challenge is, and why your property tax bill jumped so much in December, is that if you don't put enough state aid into that formula to keep up with the increase, schools can levy more property taxes to make up for it. So we saw increases in both years of this biennium. For 25-27, there was no new state money put into that general big AIDS pot, and that's why property taxes went up, which is why Tom Tiffany is trying to use this as an affordability issue to say, hey, your property taxes are going up because of Tony Evers. I mean, it misses the whole thing about the state aid component, but still, Tony Evers opened the door to this hike, and I will come in the office and fix it. For Democrats, David Crowley, they're talking more about we're not funding schools properly in their minds. They want to do more. So this big question for the next governor is, what resources do you have? And what of those resources will you put into education for K-12 when you've got Medicaid, you've got University of Wisconsin system, you've got all these other kind of demands on the state budget to deal with in your next 2-year period?
Republicans have even gone as far to put a question related to that 400-year veto on the November ballot. It'll ask voters to prohibit the governor from using the partial veto to create or increase any type of tax or fee. If it's passed, how would that impact the 400-year veto regarding school revenue limits? And what are other ways that a line item veto could be used by a governor if that practice is upheld by voters?
So I do not believe that it applies retroactively. Therefore, the 400 veto would remain. And remember, that can be changed anytime. You could have lawmakers come in January of next year and change the law. Signed by the governor, that veto would go away. It's a matter of you have right now a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature, and they can agree on that. So as long as you have no area of agreement, it remains. So this would be a continuation of reigning in that power that's been going on for 20, 30 years. There used to be a thing called the Vanna White veto, where the governor could cross out individual letters, create new words. There was the Frankenstein veto, where the governor could strike out parts of sentences and stitch two of them together to create a new one. The voters reined that in. This would be a new limit on the power. It's still it would still be one of the most powerful veto pens in the country for any governor, because you still can cross out things. You can still write down spending, for example. So if, let's say, the next budget includes $3 million for J.R. Ross, you could cross out some zeros and write that down to $3,000. That still would be there, I believe, even if this were to occur. It still, though, gives a governor great power to rewrite what lawmakers send him or her through the budget process. Remember, it only applies to spending bills. You can't do it anything else. And so yeah, it's still significant power, and you still have the option to override that veto, 2/3 vote in both houses. But we don't have maps right now. They're going to give you 2/3 majorities in two houses. You have to have bipartisan support, override a veto. But that's still going to be a very powerful tool for the next governor to reshape that language that's sent to him or her in the budget.
So with the loss of the Vanna White veto and the Frankenstein veto, I would also argue that we have lost the ability to creatively name vetoes.
Yeah, possibly. They did not come up with a really good name for this one, that's for sure. But, the governor, he struck out a couple of numbers and a dash and just pushed these numbers together. It went from whatever to 24, 25. He recreated that number out of different numbers. So it's it was a smart move by the governor in terms of how to use that veto. The question is, politically, was it good for him and Democrats to have that? Because now Republicans are hanging over their necks, right, left and right, that your property tax bill went up because of what governor just did in this budget, and Democrats didn't stop them.
This is Capital Notes. I'm WUWM education reporter Catherine Kokel, pinch hitting today for Mayan Silver. I'm speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, about the role that education policy is playing in Wisconsin politics. We were just talking about higher ed. You started to talk about it, and so I want to keep talking about what's going on in higher ed here. UW has lost its president and is now working on hiring a new one. The political divide between the Universities of Wisconsin Board of Regents and the system's president was pretty much on full display this spring when UW President Jay Rothman was fired. There's a very public back and forth about how much notice Rothman had about his firing and how the regents felt he really wasn't delivering decisive leadership. How could our governor candidates, David Crowley or Tom Tiffany, affect this new balance as governor? We're coming into a new phase of leadership here.
Well, it depends, what the regents are looking for in a new president and who that person might be speaking to. Rothman, for example, is brought in basically to speak Republican. He's a non-traditional candidate or non-traditional president. Didn't come from an academic background, came from a large law firm. There was a thought that he was brought in because he was more friendly or be a better audience from GOP lawmakers. They control and have controlled both house legislatures since basically 2011. There was a small window for a couple months, 6 months in 2012, where the Democrats of the Senate via recall elections, but that didn't last. So if you have unified GOP control, how do you make the pitch to Republicans for more resources when Republicans in general think UW gets too much, that the system is out of touch with the average Wisconsinite, and they hear complaints from their constituents that, kid A, B, and C couldn't get into Madison, which is a flagship campus. So Rothman did not do a very good job of that in the minds of some regions because they didn't get more. Yes, they got more in this last budget, current budget, I should say, because Governor Evers made it a bottom line for him with Republicans of, we are going to put roughly $250 million more in UW, but in past budgets, they weren't getting a bunch of new aid from the state. So who is that next governor, and what kind of audience might the new president get with that next governor? If it's Tom Tiffany, I don't have all of his UW bullet points at my beck and call right now, but I will bet you he's not more receptive to the $700 million than what David Crowley might be. And I'll bet you money that neither will be proposing a full request from UW of $700 million. That's just a lot of money that they're asking for. But you're going to get a better audience if you're the UW system from Democrats and Republicans, because Democrats have said for several years now that we have starved the system. In their mind, starved the system. Republicans, can you have questions about how the system is spending money? They've got questions about DEI. They are not real big fans of the system, especially the Madison campus at times. And that's reflected in their approach to the budget over the last 15 years.
Yeah, the UW Regents also really wanted to see a solid plan from Rothman about how to deal with artificial intelligence. And they said at the time that he didn't really deliver on that. I think AI is something a lot of college students and families are thinking about. I'm talking to them about it a lot in terms of both how it's impacting the entry-level job market and cheating, academic integrity. Is there any interest that you see at the state level in legislating or guiding around AI as it relates to either higher ed or at the K-12 level?
Oh, there have been bills about AI. There's a legislation about cell phone bans in schools, those kinds of things. My impression about the debate with UW in the Capitol has largely been Republicans want it to be more about churning out people ready to start jobs. They have less patience for UW. I don't want to pick on certain majors, so I won't mention them, but some liberal arts degrees are not worth much for Republicans. So for their approach to UW, it's more about whatever you can do to prepare people for the workforce.
Probably a good call not to call out specific degree programs. We'll get a lot of emails. As spoken as someone with a journalism degree.
Yeah.
Okay, turning back to the governor's race a little bit more, I think it's fair to say that neither of our candidates here have made education the cornerstone of their campaigns. But Republican Tom Tiffany supports the voucher program and has repeatedly voted during his time in the legislature to expand it. Conversely, Democrat David Crowley has said that public schools need to be strengthened before the voucher program is expanded. I should say neither man has as strong of opinions as Democratic Socialist candidate Francesca Hong did. She lost in the primary but wanted to end the voucher program. Do you think we'll be hearing more about the voucher program in the months and years to come after this election?
Oh, it'll always be an issue. Yes, if Hong had won, then you're talking about that really being a focal point, especially in Milwaukee. You would have heard a lot of talking points from Republicans about her wanting to end that program. It is popular with a number of parents in Milwaukee. It happens to be a quite Democratic city. If you turn off a number of Democratic voters to a Democratic candidate, it's good for you as a Republican. So that's now kind of been shelved. But you are going to hear in coming years about the program. Democrats have talked about if they have a trifecta, they want more, in their words, accountability. Now, Republicans will argue there's already accountability. Parents can take their kids out of these schools at any time and go to a different one if they think it's not doing a good job. Democrats, they want more. They want more disclosure about things like how much money is moving from what would have gone to a district to a choice programs or choice schools because of kids who are enrolling in that. There'll be talk about that. So it definitely going to be an issue going forward for sure. But I don't see it trending toward an end of the program. From my conversations, there's just not that kind of an appetite among a number of Democrats. Now, there definitely are many who want to end it. But with Crowley, for example, I interviewed him a month or so ago, and he said there's not capacity right now in Milwaukee. If you ended choice right now, you couldn't house all these kids in the public school system. They don't have enough teachers right now in Milwaukee to do it. Staff, they just can't. So you're not going to hear David Crowley or see him propose this next budget and end the choice program.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I will end by saying that no politics and education discussion in Wisconsin can be complete without talking about Act 10, which, for listeners, scrapped collective bargaining rights and limited wage increases for public employees like teachers. What changes could we see to Act 10 in this next governorship?
I don't know if the governors will be the ones who change as much as it will be the courts. There was a Dane County judge in late 2024 who found that law inappropriately exempted some public safety employees from its requirements while imposing them on others. The Second District Court of Appeals in Waukesha, which is a conservative appeals court, overturned that ruling, said there was justification for making that difference. Now it's been appealed to the state Supreme Court. The justices haven't said they're going to take the case yet, but there's a going bet that they will. So the court might change it. If it's a full Democratic trifecta in the Capitol, you might see them repeal it. That would possibly happen. But one way or another, we're going to see probably some change to that law because of the courts and the legal challenges before them. If Tiffany's governor, he's not going to vote to repeal or propose repealing the law. So I wouldn't, worry about that happening. But yeah, the courts definitely is an avenue for that law to change right now. That's a pretty good. People that I talked to in the Capitol are betting that the court would overturn that law if and when it accepts the case.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you so much for diving into all things education with me today, JR.
Hey, anytime.
That was JR Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM education reporter Catherine Kokel. Maayan Silver is back in the captain's seat next time. You can listen for our segments every other Monday with an extended segment on Lake Effect. And as always, you can grab more Capitol Notes wherever you get your podcasts.